Two Primarchs built for war. One, the Wolf King, Leman Russ, the Emperor's executioner. The other, Angron, the Red Angel, cursed by the butcher's nails. If they fought, not just in legend, but in a true test, who would come out on top? We actually have one canonical answer, the infamous Night of the Wolf. On the world of Guerna, Angron had led the World Eaters in yet another massacre, culling civilians and enemies alike. Russ was dispatched to stop him. Their armies clashed, brother against brother, Space Wolves versus World Eaters. And at the center, the two Primarchs themselves collided. Russ came armed with his chainsword Krakenmaw. Angron wielded his great chain axe Widowmaker. They fought with such ferocity that both weapons were destroyed in the duel. Angron, driven by the nails, fought like a beast unleashed. He battered Russ into the ground, leaving the Wolf King beaten in single combat. And yet, while Angron stood over him, Russ's warriors had already surrounded the Red Angel. At a word from Russ, they could have ended Angron then and there. But Russ called them off. He refused to kill his brother, even though the opportunity was his. So who won that day? If we look only at the duel, Angron put Russ down. But if we step back, Russ had complete control of the battlefield. He caged Angron, broke his weapon, and proved he could restrain him. That one event sets the stage for this death match. Angron the stronger in the pit, Russ the stronger as commander. Before we can judge who wins, we need to know who they are at their peak. Let's start with Angron, the Red Angel, Primarch of the World Eaters Space Marines. He was found on New Syria, enslaved in the gladiator pits, and fitted with the butcher's nails, brutal implants hammered into his brain. These drove him into constant rage, rewarding violence with relief and punishing calm with agony. His entire existence was blood and chains. And when the Emperor took him away, he carried that fury into the Great Crusade. As Primarch, he turned the Dursti the Legion into berserkers like himself, crimson and bone-white armored killers who lived for the charge, wielding roaring chain axes and screaming oaths of rage. Angron himself towered above them, a scarred colossus whose strength and fury could tear even Astartes apart with his bare hands. Later, when he ascended into Daemonhood, his power grew beyond reason. It took the Grey Knights and entire chapters working together to banish him from the battlefield of Armageddon. He is, quite simply, rage incarnate. Now contrast that with Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolf Space Marines, the Emperor's executioner. Raised on Fenris, he embodied the savage cunning of the wolf. But make no mistake, he was no feral brute. Russ was trained as a hunter and king, and his legion mirrored that duality. The Space Wolves were brutal in close quarters, but also masters of encirclement and killbox tactics. They wore storm grey armor, etched with glowing Fenrisian runes, wolf pelts on their shoulders, and carried frost blades and chainswords into war. Russ himself was massive, clad in rune-covered armor, his fangs bared in battle, his gauntlets tipped with claws. But unlike Angron, Russ was more than a warrior. He was the Emperor's appointed executioner, the one sent to bring down wayward brothers. That meant cunning, calculation, and the will to pull the trigger even against a Primarch. If Angron was fury without restraint, Russ was fury guided by discipline. So, what we have is this: Angron, the embodiment of raw gladiatorial rage, against Russ, the hunter and executioner trained to bring monsters down. Rage against discipline, chaos against control. That's the stage for the rest of this deathmatch. So how do these two Primarchs actually stack up when the fight begins? To answer that, we need to split this deathmatch into two scenarios: the duel and the battlefield. First, the duel. If we lock Angron and Russ into a cage with nothing but their armor and weapons, history gives us a clear precedent. The Night of the Wolf wasn't just a clash of legions, it was a personal battle between them. Angron's chain axe roared against Russ's chainsword, and both weapons were destroyed in the fury of their strikes. Angron, fueled by the nails, overwhelmed Russ and drove him to the ground. That's canon. But the fight didn't end there. Even as Russ lay beaten, his warriors had Angron surrounded. Russ chose restraint, pulling them back, but the truth is, in single combat, Angron proved he could overpower his brother, and that's the key. Angron dominates in raw physicality. The butcher's nails push him beyond reason, beyond control, and in a straight duel he is nearly unstoppable. He tears enemies apart with chain axes or his bare hands, and his demon form takes him even further. If it's a one-on-one fight in the pit, Angron's fury is more than Russ can contain. But on the battlefield, that's where everything changes. Russ isn't just a fighter. He's a hunter, a tactician, and the Emperor's executioner. His Space Wolf Space Marines fight in packs, encircle their prey, and spring coordinated ambushes. At the Night of the Wolf, Russ didn't need to win the duel. He already had Angron trapped. That's his strength, setting the board so his enemy has no way out. And Angron, his fury cuts both ways. He drives his World Eaters forward like a storm, smashing lines apart in brutal shock assaults. But the longer the battle drags on, the less control he has. His legion fragments into frenzied packs, fighting more like a mob than an army. That volatility is exactly what a hunter like Russ exploits. So here's the split. In the pit, Angron wins. On the field, Russ wins. It's gladiator rage against the discipline of the executioner. The real question is, which matters more? Every death match has the obvious matchup points: strength, weapons, tactics, but the real heat comes from the wild cards, the X factors that make debates about Primarchs go on forever. So let's pull those receipts. First, the butcher's nails. Angron's greatest strength is also his greatest weakness. The nails drive him into superhuman fury, making him nearly unstoppable in close combat. But they also destroy his ability to strategize or control his legion. Even other Primarchs like Lorgar noted that Angron was more beast than general, a weapon that burned itself out the longer it was used. That's why the World Eaters often fractured into uncontrollable mobs. In the pit, the nails are everything. On the battlefield, they're a liability. Now, compare that with Leman Russ's role as the Emperor's executioner. He wasn't just chosen to be a warrior, he was chosen to bring down brothers. That's a huge X factor because it means Russ was trained, armed, and conditioned to fight other Primarchs. The Emperor knew he might have to cut down one of his own creations, and Russ was the blade he kept sharp for that task. It's why the wolves fight in packs, why they practice encirclement, and why Russ himself never hesitated to strike when the Imperium demanded it. Another factor, Daemonhood. Angron doesn't just stop at being a Primarch. When he ascends into a Demon Primarch, his power multiplies beyond reason. At the First War for Armageddon, it took the Grey Knights, a chapter of psychic warriors handcrafted to fight demons, to banish him from the material realm. Even then, the banishment lasted a century, and after the Cicatrix Maledictum tore the galaxy apart, Angron returned even sooner. That's the kind of power that tilts any duel unless you bring the rarest counters. Russ's wild card comes later in the Heresy, when he faced Horus in the novel Wolfsbane. He didn't win, but he did what almost no one else could, wound the War Master. That fight shows Russ wasn't just loyalist fury, he was capable of holding his own against a Primarch amped by the powers of chaos. It adds weight to the argument that, under the right circumstances, Russ could do the same to Angron. So what do the X factors tell us? Angron's rage and demonhood make him the monster in the pit. But Russ's role as executioner and his proven record against corrupted brothers make him the hunter who can bring even monsters down. And that's where the debate never ends. Do you value unstoppable fury, or the blade honed to stop it? So where does all of this leave us? If we only judge by the pit fight, the record is clear. Angron wins. At the Night of the Wolf, he drove Russ to the ground, fueled by the agony and rage of the butcher's nails. If it's a duel, bare knuckle or blade to blade, Angron's fury is almost impossible to contain. But war isn't always fought in the pit. And as a commander, Russ has the edge. He doesn't need to overpower his opponent. He needs to outmaneuver them. On Genna, he already had Angron surrounded before the duel was even finished. Russ's role as the Emperor's executioner gave him the mindset and the training to bring down wayward brothers, and that makes him uniquely dangerous. So here's the scorecard. In a one-on-one fight, Angron has the upper hand. In a war between legions, Russ comes out on top. And when we tally it all together, the edge goes to Leman Russ, not because he's stronger, but because he's the hunter. And hunters bring monsters down. But the truth is, this debate never ends. Was Angron's rage truly unstoppable, or could Russ's discipline have put him in the ground for good? That's where I want to hear from you. Who do you think really wins this deathmatch? Drop your verdict in the comments. I'll pin the sharpest theory. And if you enjoyed this battle of the Primarchs, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next deathmatch. Because next time, we're throwing another pair of legends into the arena, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.